So I actually had a bunch of slides prepared, but the AV situation is a bit lacking today. So we're going to do it the old-fashioned way of speaking and writing on the board. And since we're such a small group here, we're all close to each other and we can all hear each other. We're just going to be having it as a bit of a dialogue. You know, I'll ask you some questions so you get a chance to think about what you think of preparedness and how to get prepared. And if you have any questions during my presentation, feel free to just jump in. We'll just do it super easy that way. So yeah, as I said, my name is Simon and we are from North Shore. I'm from North Shore Emergency Management. If any of you are wondering what's that funny accent, I am from Denmark, but I moved here a couple of years ago and I'm now living on the North Shore as a North Shore resident. At North Shore Emergency Management, we are a part of the 3 North Shore municipalities. So if you live on the North Shore in any of the 3 municipalities, we serve your municipality. And if something bad happens on the North Shore, we are there to respond to that incident within our area of work, of course. But I'm here today to talk to you all about how you can prepare yourself and your homes in the event of an emergency. Yeah. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is Alertable. And I'll hand you out some flyers here after, you can come up and get it. Alertable is our notification system that you can download as an app if you have a smartphone. You can also sign up if you have a landline, so you'll get a phone call with an automated voice telling you what's going on. You can get texts. So there's different variations depending on what method of communication you have. You can also go online, go to alertable.ca, and then you'll be able to see any notifications that are sent out. So what this does is if you get the app or sign up in any other way and say there is a wildfire or if there is a landslide or an earthquake, you'll be notified immediately through Alertable and we'll be able to give information through Alertable on what precautions you should take and what actions you can take to help yourself in the emergency. So I really want to encourage you all to go up and sign up for this. Have any of you here signed up or heard of Alertable before? Just raise a hand. Yeah, okay, great. That's a good handful of people. If you only do one thing after my presentation today, it should be signing up for Alertable. That's a really good thing. And it's a straightforward thing. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of spending a little bit of time figuring out how it all works and you're good to go. And it's a one-time setup. You'll get the notifications. You don't have to think about it anymore. So why is it important to be prepared, you might wonder? Well, what do you think? Why do you think it's important to be prepared?
I have pets, so I have to be ready to go with them.
Yeah, taking care of your pets.
Don't want to lose your home.
Nope, don't want to lose your home.
It could take a few days for help to come.
Yeah, that's very true. We actually recommend at minimum you should be prepared to be self-sufficient for 72 hours and even better up to a week, because we have 3 talented and very good fire departments on the North Shore. Got a great member over here. But as great as they are, there's also a limited amount. They can only respond to so many things on the North Shore at once. And if there's ever something large scale like an earthquake that would disrupt access to water and gas and other services like that, you need to be self-reliant until larger supports can come and kick in. So that means you gotta make sure you have food, you have water for 72 hours. You also want to think about, say, if you have pets or any other dependents that you're living with, you want to make sure that you can take care of them. We've got a household preparedness guide here that I will also encourage you all to go and pick up. It'll guide you through all of the things that you want to consider to put in your emergency kit and so on. And we'll touch a bit on an emergency kit later, but you can take this with you and look through it later at your own pace and see what there is to really dive into. We know that people who are prepared tend to be more resilient, and if you prepare, you're going to be better off than people who didn't prepare, obviously. So you're doing yourself a favor by preparing, and again, it takes a bit of effort, but it pays off so much down the line. So how do we get prepared? That's the real question. And there's 3 steps. I'm going to write it up here in real old school style. I'm the younger generation. I'm typically just, keep on my computer, but.
So your writing skills. You're gonna have to do darker than that.
Yeah, this is the one color that I've got, so we're gonna have to work with it. The first step is understand your hazards. Rather than me. Oh, well, thank you. Understand your hazards. And what I mean with that is hazards are not the same for everyone. If you're living close to, say, a creek, then you might be really susceptible to flooding. If you're living right on the edge of a forest, you might be susceptible to wildfire. But that's not, that's not the same hazards. But can you kind of help me out? What are some of the hazards that you might foresee here on the North Shore? Fires?
Rocks. Fire.
Earthquake? Landslide? Yeah.
Landslide.
Any other thoughts?
We have a water main right behind our house that goes up to the Rice Lake area.
Yeah. Also, if you, you can't really look outside right now, but the sun has been really coming down the last couple of days. It's been great. But extreme heat is also a real hazard, and something, as I'm sure you're all very much aware of, was made quite clear in 2021 when we had the heat dome come in, which claimed the lives of several hundred people in BC. And that's again something where you can take actions to prepare yourself for extreme heat, and we'll touch on that later. But yeah, understand your hazards. Figure out what's going on. You can go to our website. We have a whole section of hazards where you can really read more about the different hazards on the North Shore and how they might affect you. So once you know what the hazards are and what you might be susceptible to, you might not have to be too worried about a locust outbreak or like a tsunami. Something people think is a big hazard is tsunami, but on the North Shore it's really not something we need to be overly concerned about. So figure out what the hazards are.
Do we have any risk because of the chemical plant lower level?
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, I mean, a chemical leak is certainly not something anyone wants to see. We do a lot of work with the chemical plants. They do all of the work, and they do it really well. I've met with them, with their hazard management team several times, and they do really wonderful work of managing their hazards. It's a long-winded explanation of why it's safe, and if you're really interested in that, you can join the community advisory panel. Maybe some of you are already members, but they have a community advisory panel where you can go and meet with their hazard team, and they inform you on what's going on and all of the incidents that might be there and what the potential hazards might be. But after having spent some time with them and really tried to understand what's going on there, I actually feel pretty good about it. For something truly bad to happen, it's fairly unlikely. They're talking about a 1 in a million years incident. That's how they measure their likelihood that it would happen 1 in a million years, once in a million years.
But if they have an earthquake and the chlorine tanks explode,
yeah, but they factor that in. A part of that is that they store chlorine in smaller containers. But anyways, it's a sidetrack. If you really want to get into that, I really suggest you join the community advisory panel. They're way better at going into that.
You might want to also get involved in the current council discussions, because the current plan is to put a hydrogen plant right next to the chlorine plant. And I still remember my grade 9 chemistry. Hydrogen plus chlorine is not good. But to answer your question, sir, I remember hearing at a council meeting that what they're doing is they're storing the bulk of their chlorine in the rail cars, so that any one rail car releases a relatively small amount. And that's one of the ways they're mitigating risk at the chlorine.
Chlorine, I mean, it's a long discussion. We could spend the whole night here talking about it, but I don't think we need to do that tonight. Once you know your hazards, the second step is make a plan. That's where this flyer can help you out. You gotta make a plan. You gotta, yeah, actually we'll get into that in a second, because I just want to mention the third step first, which is build your kit. So these are the 3 steps you can take to be better prepared for any emergencies. So we've already been through hazards, but let's jump on to, just gotta find the right notes here. Making your plan. Yeah. The next step, once you know your hazards, you have to make an emergency plan to prepare for those hazards. So this playbook here, if you fill that out, that can help you determine how you're going to act during the emergency. So what that means is, say if you have a husband or wife, or if you have kids or friends, anyone you know that you'd want to connect with, you got to prepare for the possibility that you might not be able to call them, or you might not be able to get in contact with them. Even if you live out in Deep Cove and your person you want to talk to is living in Lonsdale, and it's typically like a nice 20-minute drive, 15-minute drive. In an emergency, things can back up, roads can be closed, you might not be able to access each other for days, or the phone systems might break down, you might not be able to call each other. If you make a plan on where you want to meet, or maybe you can make a plan on any alternative ways of communication, say knowing each other's email addresses, because typically going through the internet, I mean, that's a different form of communication from a phone, so even if phone lines aren't working, you might be able to go on the internet. Like just knowing that sort of things can really help you communicate and find your loved ones in an emergency. So, just let me share some stuff here. Yeah, you should also know about where to get your information if an emergency happens. Like, where do you go to for information? A vertical, as I've already been through, is a great start. That's where you can get information from the government. Other important places include social media. If you're on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, there is a Emergency BC page on all 3 platforms where you can go in. We at NSEM also have social media accounts that you can go and follow us. You can find all of that on our website. There's also radio. If you have access to radio, tune on to some of the government media like CBC or News 1130. Those places will broadcast information. And in a major emergency, I would imagine that even a lot of the commercial radio stations would actually just be broadcasting emergency information. And radio, like we have a lot of radio towers across the North Shore, we can broadcast information as well. So that's also a good way. And we actually encourage everyone to have little handheld radios in your emergency kits. A little crank up, like you can even get them where you can like just dial a little turn thing, and then you can get the battery to run. But also keep spare batteries, so you can have a battery-powered radio. That way you can get information and put that in your emergency kit. Also television. If television is working, go to see like CBC or any other channels and see which ones would be broadcasting information. So that's a part of your plan, is to know where you can get the information. Yeah, so if you have any people who are vulnerable in your family, say if you have people who are using a wheelchair or people who are having any illnesses or dependent on medication, it's also really important that you factor that in for emergency situations. So that means you might want to have extra medication that can last you for, say, a couple of weeks, until you might be able to get your hands on more medication that can last you for a longer period of time. You also want to think about if you have any disabilities, like what sort of things do you need to help yourself if you can't access the places that you normally go to access. If you can't access your pharmacy or your doctor for an extended period of time, how can you prepare for that outcome? And it's a very individual and very personal question, and that's something you'll need to ask yourself. And if it's something you're really concerned about, you can consult with a doctor, of course. Yeah, know your neighbors. That's also an important thing. knowing your neighbors is really crucial, because even though we might not always know our neighbors, we're just passing them on the street or on the stairs or whatever. Once something bad happens, people come together. Like typically, emergencies actually bring out the best in people. People want to help each other, and it really invokes that sense of community. And if you already know your neighbors, if you know who lives next door or upstairs or whatever, it'll be that much easier to go to your neighbors and ask for help, or go and offer them help if they need it during an emergency. You might be, maybe your upstairs neighbor has plenty of water and you've got plenty of food. Well, hey, suddenly you don't need to put 2 and 2 together to see that you could make a good deal here, right? So people who have strong communities around where they are will be better off in emergencies, and they will get through it in a better way. So it's as good a time as any to go and knock on your neighbor's door with a tray of brownies and say, "Do you want a cup of coffee?" and talk about emergencies, because that could just help you out one day.
Just so you know the history of this community, Simon.
Yeah.
Every community association that's represented here has had a major event happen.
Really? Okay.
So Blue Ridge had the Berkeley Escarpment mudslide, where a life was lost. Deep Cove had the the Lions Manor fire. Here in Seymour, we had 2 fires, as well as a police incident recently at the Riverwoods Co-op just across the street here. So we've all got experience, and you're right. It was beautiful the way the community came together at those different events.
I'm really glad you say that. I didn't actually know that history, but that's really, really relevant to know. Then you all know the importance of community. And I mean, you're already, like, you're here together, you know each other. I assume a lot of you are neighbors then, so you've already taken that really good first step in preparedness then. So good for you. I'm sorry you had to all go through those events. That's really hard.
That's the other thing, is this facility here is key in all of those events, because this is where people shelter.
Yeah. I actually, on a personal note, I've also been through a recent emergency traumatic incident. I was a resident of the building on 12th Street that went on fire in December. So I found myself without a home. And I'm in a new place now. I'm well, got my things out, I got my cats out, my partner and everything. But I definitely felt the importance of community in that, because we were all chatting with our neighbors and trying to share information and find out what's going on and give each other tips on how to deal with insurance, and this place here, you can go there and they will hand you out vouchers for new clothing if you lost your clothing and things like that. So you can really help each other that way, and that's really important. And yeah, I also actually personally discovered the need for a grab-and-go bag, which I'll get into in a second, when being awoken at 6 in the morning. So another thing that's part of making your plan is you got to know your shut-off. Like, how do you shut off water or gas in your building? Say if there is an earthquake and you have a water line break or a gas line break, it might take a while before anyone can actually come and do that for you. It's happening all over the place. You need to be able to go down and shut off your water break so that the water stops flowing out, causing further damage. You need to know where to turn off gas so you can stop that fire hazard that obviously is.
Simon, excuse me. Could you tell us in what situations you do need to turn your water and gas off? Like what scenario would that be?
I mean, a ruptured pipe where you're not able to get help. Obviously, if it's a standalone incident, you're just having an issue in your building, call a plumber, call a gas technician. If you smell gas, call 911 as well. This is a scenario where the society is so stretched that you can't get the help that you need. And it's not that you need to be licensed plumbers or gas technicians, but most buildings should have just like a simple water turn off. And if you know where that is, that's also really crucial. And that's something you can touch.
For the gas meter, you need a special tool for the gas meter.
Just a crescent wrench will do it.
So in other words, we should all find our crescent wrench and put them beside the gas meter.
Yeah,
or at least know where to get one, yeah.
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 But I think if you have a fire in your house, the first thing the fire department are probably gonna do is shut off your gas unless it's really small.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make it clear, I'm certainly not encouraging that you just take care of your own emergencies for any normal situations. Like, this is like, if no one is coming to help you because they're stretched, then that's when you do it. Otherwise, call these guys.
Yeah, actually, we took an emergency preparedness course in the past, and the guys that were working for the gas company said, well, you know, you really have to have an incident before you turn your gas off, because if you turn your gas off just as a preventative thing, it could be 3 weeks before they come back and turn it back on, so.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I mean, this is like earthquake level scenario we're talking here. Yeah.
My husband, a really conscious guy, there's a little, like if there's an earthquake, there's a shut off that happens. If an earthquake happens, it automatically shuts your gas off, right at the meter thing. So that's a we've got installed it.
Well, that's a really good thing.
Special installation.
Yeah.
I don't know, was it a special?
These are the aspirated to do it,
Oh, okay, I see.
but it's simple. Simple thing with the, it's got drawbacks though, and you're gonna pump up again, it shuts the gas off.
But then you just have to reset the plug and it's going back again. So, but yeah, really, really amazing.
That's really neat then. I mean, that
Yeah.
certainly helps them.
And I
Yeah.
don't think it was expensive for them to do it. It was expensive. Well, I don't know. You and I have a different thing about expense.
Actually, several years ago, I have moved to preparedness, and they actually gave us a special, like it's a
Oh, yeah.
wrench to turn it off if there is a leak. If there's a gas leak, then you turn it off.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to be different from building to building and what the situation is like. Maybe you have these automatic shutoffs. That's great. Again, you need to go in and understand your hazards. Try to find out what you're dealing with.
I have a little knowledge on this because my best friend works for Fortis, and I would say, you know, definitely be careful, but also don't just run and shut your gas off willy-nilly, because once you do, you have to have a technician come out to bleed the lines and relight the pilots. If everybody did it, it would probably be several weeks of work just to relight your water tank.
Simon, if we were threatened by forest fire up where we are, Upper Blue Ridge, would you recommend that we shut off our gas? If like we could see flames from our house, if God forbid something like that should happen?
I might actually ask if the fire department have any answers to that.
My quick answer is no. So in that scenario, if everybody's home, then it's safe. If you get an evacuation order and you're required to, not just an alert, but actually get out now, that will come with instructions on what to do. And I've never actually heard about gas being shut off.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, so at this point, you've understood your hazards, you've made a plan, now you gotta build your kit. You actually gotta prepare for what could come. You'll need basic supplies, tools, food, water. Stores might be inaccessible, closed, or they'll run out because people will rush out as soon as there is an emergency and the stores will just be picked clean. And you know, we live on what can almost become an island. We've got 2 bridges and a highway. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to think that those 3 points of access could be shut off. So it could take a little while for things to get restarted. So yeah, as we've been through, food and water, minimum 72 hours, ideally a week. You should make sure to keep your essential supplies in one location where it's safe and accessible. You know, during an emergency, that's not really the time where you want to be going around trying to find different things and like pulling out of 5 different cupboards or whatever. Try to see if you can just find one cupboard space or garage space or whatever you have where you live that makes sense for you. And Yeah. So in a basic emergency kit, so we've got this. This here is the North Shore Evacuation Guide. What that gives you is some information on, as part of making a plan, but what it also does is show how you can build a grab-and-go kit. So what do you do if you need to vacate your house right now because there's a fire or there's some other threat, like there might be a landslide coming down, there's an evacuation order in place, you don't have time to assemble your gear because it's now or never. So you want to have a backpack that's just ready to go, or trolley or whatever, like something that you can bring with you, with different basic supplies. Food and water, I mean, you can't store for that long of a time, so like just maybe 1 or 2 bottles of water. But what is really more important is that you have some warm clothes, you have a flashlight, batteries, you might want to have some medication, you might want to have copies of important documents, sorry. But you can see all of that in here. And it's really a lot better that you actually just sit down and spend some time looking through this. And maybe you already have a grab-and-go kit, and if so, that's great. Maybe you'll get some inspiration on what more you can put in there. It doesn't have to be something that you get done in one day. You know, start by getting a backpack, and then add one thing, and add a little bit more to it, and then over time you'll have a fully built out and ready to go kit. Yeah.
Don't forget pet food.
Pet food, yeah.
Can opener.
That too. Yeah, your food is not worth a lot if you can't open it. And then one more thing is keep an old pair of shoes under your bed. You know, if you're woken up at 4 a.m. and it's time to go, you've got to just be able to get out of bed, put on a pair of shoes, and you're good to go. When I experienced the fire back in December, I was woken up at, it was like 6 in the morning or something, by the fire alarm, and I didn't have any time, but I had a grab-and-go bag, and I had a pair of shoes, and I threw that on and put my grab-and-go bag out, and it was a December day. All I wore was like, I put on like a t-shirt when I just got out of bed, and then like a pair of pants. It was not warm, but I had a sweater, I had a scarf, and I had toque, and just, you know, some basic stuff that I could, and a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, like just enough to get me going with those immediate needs. It really makes you feel that much better and more like yourself, and especially because it's your own clothing. You know, if you borrow someone else's, it might be a little bit too large, or the shoes are a little too tight, and it seems like it's a minor thing, but it actually really matters that you're feeling comfortable. Because if you're comfortable and you've got the basics covered, then you can start thinking about, like, you can think ahead, you can think about others, and you can start moving through the emergency that's happening. So yeah, the last thing I want to say is just preparedness is a journey, it's not a destination. You always want to make sure that you keep revisiting your kits. You know, bottled water have a certain shelf life, and it's not that the water goes bad, but the plastic does. So like say if your water expires 2 years after you buy it, then take off the label and write down that it's only for like non-potable use, so like for washing or for watering plants. But just, yeah, it's not about just finishing your kit, it's about maintaining that. And it doesn't mean that you need to be spending 3 hours every day preparing for all of the bad things that can happen, but just revisiting it. Like a good reminder is like, say you do it twice a year when you change the clocks. If you just teach yourself that changing the clocks means updating your kit, well, then you have a good 6-month interval to check up, make sure your food is not expired and that your water is good and that the batteries didn't just ionize over the last 6 months or whatever. So yeah, just keep on with the preparedness, and then you'll be so much better off when well, knock on wood, but if something happens. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? I know we've been able to talk it through all, but I'm happy to have a discussion if there's anything you feel like I haven't really touched on.
I just want to mention you can get emergency kits already made up.
Yeah.
I was trying to go my phone, Rotary Landscape, they sell them.
Yeah.
Already made up with 72 hours of compressed food and everything that's in there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, which company was that?
That's Rotary, the Rotary Club.
Oh, the Rotary.
Rotary Club Landscape, they sell. I was trying to see if I could find it on the website.
There's many different
Another outlet called 72hours.com, I think. And yeah, they have kids, they have everything in reasonable prices.
Yeah, we've used them before.
72hours.com.
Another way of doing it is also just to go to Canadian Tire or some other department store where you can find a little bit of everything. Go in with a shopping list and just pull things down from the shelves. But yeah, I mean, it is certainly also a lot easier to just do it all in one go. You just want to make sure that if you buy something that you actually know what's in there. Because if you don't know what's in your kit, you're less likely to use it and you're less likely to maintain it. So if you just buy it and don't even open it and put it in the cupboard, then you don't know what to do with it when you need it. And that is why I think it's a good idea to build your own kit, just because it teaches you familiarity with the kit. You take more ownership.
And also make sure you include a first aid kit.
First aid kit? Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff is in here, and we have more resources on our website where you can see full lists of emergency kits and so on.
And remember your pets.
And your pets.
How long were you out of your place for?
For me, we were pretty fortunate and actually found a new place within 2 weeks.
Did you have assistance with that, or did you find it yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one thing we do at North Shore Emergency Management is we offer what's called emergency social services. Since you've all been impacted by an incident, have you ever heard of that before, ESS?
We used you guys here when I started.
Yeah.
You guys 3 days, and then we went to BC Housing to get some housing for other housing.
So ESS, as we call it, Emergency Support Social Services, is gives you, and it's a provincial program, so it's no matter where you are in BC, this is the basic you can expect. Provides you with 72 hours of some sort of roof over your head. Ideally, we want to put people in a hotel if possible, but the reality is it can book up, and then we'll start what we call group lodging, which might be in a community center or a sports arena or something where we can put out cots and blankets. But just so you have somewhere to stay for the foreseeable future, like the next 3 days. You should all definitely make sure that you've got housing insurance. I don't know if you're tenants or owners, but either way, insurance is so important. I can't stress this enough.
But also good insurance.
Good insurance as well. Yeah, don't just settle for the cheapest and best thing you find. I know it can seem like a bit of just money out the window, $50 every month on this thing that I'll probably never use. But trust me, if you do use it, need it, you'll be so happy that you have it. We very frequently see people who are not insured, and if their apartment or house or whatever burns down, there is no help. But there are some charitable organizations, but there is no financial help. There is no way of getting easily back on your feet. Whereas your insurance will cover emergency housing for a certain amount of time. Also, depending on the insurance policy, it might offer you payout, so you'll get a certain allowance that you can live off of to supplement that. So, yeah, insurance is really the best thing you can do for yourself to prepare as well. But that was what, so to your question on what we did, that was what helped us, because we're able to get subsidized. So they took our rent, and then we just found a temporary place that was a bit more than our usual rent, and then they would subsidize that extra amount. So that meant I wasn't suddenly faced with a large extra expense that might be hard to deal with under normal circumstances. And especially, I mean, being on the North Shore, as you might be aware, it's a very expensive housing situation here. And if you've been in your units for a long time, you might be staying at a rent that's significantly lower than what it would be on the market right now. So it can be very hard to transition. And BC Housing do offer subsidized housing if you qualify, but that can also take a while to kick in. So that's really where like insurance can bridge that gap, because we can help out in the very short term, and we do sometimes get extensions for emergency social services, but ultimately insurance, and good insurance, is the best thing.
I also just wanted to say that Parkgate Community Center is a place, a gathering place for emergencies, so we have a mandate here to take people in if there's a fire or for some reason. So this is an evacuation center here.
Yeah.
Just so you all know.
Is Ron Andrews also?
You know what, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but most of the community centers would be a good place to go anyway.
Thank you.
We have contacts for all of the rec facilities on the North Shore, also with West Vancouver. And if we need to use a space, we will just call them and ask to use the space.
So this is on your website?
No, this is our internal.
Oh, your internal.
This is not something the general public is concerned with, because that's just, like, that's part of my job, is preparing those contacts and knowing who to call when we want to call them.
And how does the public find out that kind of information then?
When you need help.
You wouldn't
they
need
issue
to, like,
statements.
If you
at the
are
time.
ever,
Statements?
Yes, they do. Yeah. I remember them saying this was the designated place for the Lions Fire, and I remember Mickey McDougall Gym being used for a Lynn Valley event, where they said all the people were sheltering there.
I tried going on a website trying to find that when I first moved here.
there's not like a rule of thumb of where you should go. Like we would, the app is a good part of it. If it's a smaller area, say if it's only an apartment complex, we will show up and we'll direct everyone to wherever it is that it's gathering. If it's a larger area, it'll be more like mass communication on where we would open these centers. And I mean, for an area around here, certainly would be Parkgate, that's our go-to place. But say if it's in Ambleside, we would probably try to open the aquatic center there, because we want to keep people close to where their communities are. Like, there's no reason to shuttle people halfway across the North Shore if they could just go to the community center that they normally frequent anyways down the road. Better to keep people in an area, in an environment that they're comfortable and familiar with. But it's a case-by-case situation.
I have one question, and that is in the event of a large calamity, like a 7-8 Richter scale seismic event. I know we have 2 major bridges. We have 1 major highway. I've heard anecdotally that neither of those bridges, particularly the second narrows, are seismically safe. And we saw the exercises they did a couple of years ago where they're, you guys coordinated with everybody and they had a landing. The hovercraft came in and practiced airdrops and stuff at Kate's Park. But my question is, I know because my buddy works for Fortis, there is 1 line that feeds the North Shore with natural gas. How about electricity? Because, one of the things you said is use the internet, use radio. We know that we have a transformer station down in a river area, but where does the power come from? And in a large seismic event, one of the things I've seen before is where internet routers went out or lost power along the way. You might be connected to the Wi-Fi in your house, but you still don't have internet. So I'm wondering, what does that look like? What are the chances that we're going to keep internet? How many power connections? Like if there's a high transmission line that goes, say, like there's a Burrard Thermal over in Ioko there, if they had to fire that up, do we get power that way, or what happens? What are the chances we're keeping electricity? What are the chances we're keeping natural gas?
That is really a better question for BC Hydro, just as in they have their own emergency structures. Yeah. They have engineers or technicians who do this every day, and they have their contingency plans in place. So I don't think I want to speak too much detail about what might.
I would hope they'd tell you.
Well, we work with them on plans, but it's really
Yeah.
their job to make sure that there are emergency plans in place for bringing electricity over. Like that is not what we would normally do. What we do is prepare for situations where there is electricity and where there is internet, and prepare for situations where there is not electricity and there is not internet. Because by being prepared for both situations, then we can really handle everything that they might throw us, and then we can just. And I know that BC Hydro is doing a really good job at working at their infrastructure, and they have people who are doing this every day, making these plans and working with the province on these plans as well.
Yeah, the track record in this neighborhood is not great for hydro specifically.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I don't want to speak too much about these details because I'm just not the right person.
Fair.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about North Shore Emergency Management, like how many people on staff and like what your capacity is in?
Yeah, of course. So as for paid staff, we are 9 people. So in that way, we're a pretty small organization, but we have a whole volunteer group of people who can respond. I have actually a volunteer over here, so thank you, who do different roles and functions. Some people are trained at delivering emergency social services. Some people are trained at doing public presentations. We go out like we do here tonight and inform people on how to stay prepared. We have some who are a bit more specialized in their training and can direct groups of people, so we can kind of stand up a larger response. Plus, in larger responses, we would typically bring in municipal staff to fill in roles as well. So then you would simply take a person who might normally be a traffic planner or a park ranger or whatever, and bring them in a role that is maybe not exactly what they do on a day-to-day basis, but where they can still, like we can scale up that way. And we do offer training to municipal staff as well. So we can really scale up our organization quite a bit if need be.
So you're funded by the provincial government or by these 3 municipalities?
By the 3 municipalities.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a municipal employee.
Yeah.
And we're funded by, I mean, this is all in the reports, but we're funded based on population size. So the municipality contributes an amount equal to its population. So the district, if I remember correctly, is the largest. They probably contribute the most financially. So that's all.
How does the Red Cross work into any of this, especially with the emergency part?
Yeah, so Red Cross have their own full, like, independent organization. In some communities, not on the North Shore, but in some communities, they're contracted to deliver emergency support services. In some cases, when the government takes a step back, Red Cross might come in and take over. Plus, Red Cross is obviously a huge international organization. So if something like a major earthquake were to happen here, you can bet that Red Cross and other...
Well, the way I'm asking is like the emergency phone call, like you have an emergency phone center, right, when you have a major emergency.
Yeah.
And you folks set that up with it here, because I know Red Cross does that regionally and provincially also.
Mm-hmm.
So you work together that way with them, region, when it's something really, really big, and you pull them in like you do other resources?
Yeah, I mean, we communicate and try to coordinate who does what. And
Okay.
if the Red Cross steps up and say, we're able to staff a hotline,
Right.
then we'll say,
Sure.
great, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're actually up on our 45 minutes, and I want to make sure that the captain has some time to speak as well. So maybe just one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. If there is any. All right, then thank you so much for...
Thank you.
I do make sure you grab some flyers on your way out. Yeah, I hope you'll find that helpful.
Okay. Everybody, my name is Conrad. I'm with Public Safety in District North Vancouver. By trade, I'm a suppression firefighter. I was for a very long time. For the last 3 years, I've been public education officer. And I'm also the Fire Smart coordinator for the district. So today, hopefully, just want to go over quickly what Fire Smart is, why it's important, and what we're doing here in the district, and what we can do for you, the community, and residents. So Fire Smart, the concept's been around for a very long time. It's been refined and focused in recent years. We kind of, they pulled from a lot of different agencies around the world. You guys probably all remember Smokey the Bear. Same thing, just a little bit different twist on it. Again, more refined. There's a lot more science behind it now. And they've changed the message and the branding a little bit, but it's still Smokey the Bear to help prevent forest fires. The twist on, the refinement rather, on Fire Smart is now it's how to protect your home, not just how to prevent the forest fire. Both important. If the forest isn't on fire, then your house won't burn. And if the forest is on fire, how do you prevent your house from catching on fire? So the overarching authority is Fire Smart Canada, and then the subsidiary here in BC is Fire Smart BC. And then we, in the district here, we partner with Fire Smart BC and we deliver their program. So why it's important nowadays, we've all seen a huge uptick in forest fire behavior for the last many years, at least 10 that I can remember. Across the province, globally, we've had bizarre weather patterns. Every year, Australia half burns down. Even right now, as we speak today, Fort St. John is on fire. Massive fires in Alberta right across the border. Even the district, we sent a crew of 4 up to Fort St. John just a couple days ago, and we're getting ready to send another crew any day now as soon as we can get the staff together. So, and we're only into May. So it is a big deal. And what we're seeing hotter, drier summers, a lot more heat, a lot less moisture, and bizarre weather patterns that we haven't seen before. So just perfect conditions for forest fires. Also what we're seeing coupled with that is just a heavy fuel load in the forest in general. Big reason for that is mostly because forest fires are just a natural part of the forest's life cycle. They're normal, they're natural, they are supposed to happen, and historically they happen all the time, everywhere. The difference now is we have just become really good at not only preventing them, but also putting them out when they start. Okay? They haven't had a chance to run through and burn off all that dead fuel, which has just been accumulating on the forest floor for years and years and years. Mount Seymour here is a perfect example. When's the last forest fire on Mount Seymour? I have no idea. A long time, way longer than it should be for the health of the forest. So now what we're seeing is that fuel load is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So when a fire does happen, and I'm just generally speaking here across the province, when a fire does happen, it's got a much heavier fuel load, it's much more intense, the heat is more intense, it gets bigger, hotter, faster, and it covers a lot more ground, and it's much harder to put out. So that brings us to here. That's why this is such an important program that we're trying to disseminate to the communities nowadays. We, as a community, we've never seen anything like this. The conditions are, year after year after year, they are getting worse. I did have a really fascinating slide to look at. It essentially shows the last few years across BC what forest fires look like. 2017, I think, was 1.2 million hectares burnt, which was a record. The next year, 2018, was 1.3, was a new record. And it's been going in waves. Then we had a couple years where it wasn't so bad. We had a couple really wet, rainy summers, a little cooler, but now we're starting to cycle back up. I think 2021 was the most recent numbers I could pull before I got here today. And by April 1st, which 2021 was almost 1 million hectares already, and over 6,000 or 7,000 people displaced from their homes. So it's getting worse. So we're not going to stop forest fires. It's almost impossible to do. They have lightning strikes, human caused, very common. I was at a conference with CAL FIRE who came up, one of the experts in North America. Nobody really deals with more forest fires than they do. They told us that over 90% of their forest fires are human caused. Now, that's not campers, and it is campers, but anything that humans have built. It could be their electrical system, could be their rail system, could be whatever it might be, but it's not natural. It's not lightning strikes. So that's a huge number. And here we are in a forest. So with North Vancouver specifically for us, we're bordered by the ocean and a forest that covers pretty much the entire border, however many kilometers it is. It's a lot. So specifically about forest fires and how we interface with them, we call it, in our industry, we call it a WUI. It's a WUI, wildland urban interface. That's where the community, the urban people living there, meet up with the forest. It's where the forest turns into houses, essentially. There's two kind of types that we look at. There's interface, which is where a community is built with borders onto the forest, and it's kind of like neighborhoods, houses, all the way up, then the forest starts and off it goes. There's also intermix. And intermix is where you've got, in North Van here, we have both. That's where the trees and green belts and everything are woven all around the houses, and the communities are built essentially into the forest, which is not only borders, but there's parks and green belts and stuff right inside, alongside the houses. So we deal with both at the same time here in North Van. Specifically what North Van District is doing with FireSmart, we're sort of approaching it with 3 different streams, and it's the 3 main streams that FireSmart gives us that they focus on. So the big one is, stream 1 is the fuel management. So fuel prescriptions, fuel management. With North Van District, that's our environmental department deals with that. That's where they find parcels, they examine our forest, they look at, okay, what's the first priority, what are we gonna work on next? Great timing to be here today. You've probably all noticed all around Deep Cove, Parkgate, the signs everywhere, they're stripping out trees, brush, everything. That's what they're doing. So all that built up brush, FireSmart, they're applying FireSmart methods to that fuel prescription and fuel management, and they're taking out all the dead stuff and trying to essentially mitigate any forest fire that would land in that area. So some of those concepts are they're taking out all the dead brush, they're limbing trees up to about 3 meters, trying to stop that ground fire from getting up into the canopy of the trees, things like that. Okay, so that's one stream that FireSmart gives us. Another one is the public education component. That's what I'm doing today. So we have a number of different avenues for that. We do community days, I do public talks, we've got social media that we disseminate to everybody. We also run 2 programs that I'll get into sort of at the end of my little talk here, but we have the home community recognition program, the neighborhood recognition program, and also we've just started, last year was our first one running it as the Home Partners program. That's where we actually come to people's homes and we do an assessment for them and we give them tips, write a report. Here is specifically what you can do for your house to help mitigate from a fire.
Okay, I'm interested.
Gotcha. No problem. Okay. Yeah, I'll get into a little more detail on that. Yeah, so we have that stream as well. On top of that, the district fire department specifically has a structure protection program that we've really leaned into over the last few years. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into new equipment, new trucks, new training, and that is where we can, a unit crew can come into a neighborhood with all the equipment they need, they're self-sufficient, and they can protect that community. One of our trailers, for example, you've probably seen them driving around, or being towed around rather, can protect up to 80 homes, just in that one trailer. So essentially what we'll do is we'll prioritize the homes, see who needs the most work, we'll put sprinklers on them, and this is, the concept is the community's been evacuated. So fire's coming, we can't stop it, we know it's happening, so now we're gonna try to protect the homes so that the fire can come, but the homes won't burn down. So that's the idea. So those are the sort of 3 streams that we're taking to approach this problem we have here. FireSmart, where this all came from, they've invested millions and millions of dollars into the research. In controlled fashions, they research fire behavior, they research fire impact on homes, different building materials, different plants, everything. Controlled, and they also forensically audit forest fires that have come through that they can get in and look at after the fact. Fort McMurray was a big eye-opener for them. A whole ton of research came out of that. Lytton was another interesting one. I have another really good slide on Lytton that has, I'm sure you've probably all seen pictures, aerial shots of really nothing left. There are pictures of houses burnt down to the foundation, but a nice green tree 10 or 15 feet away that didn't burn. And the concept of that and why that happened is part of why I'm here today, is because a lot of people, and I've been around and I've done the home assessments probably, we've done probably 50 or so since we started this program. What I hear a lot is, well, if a fire's coming, what's the point? just, I'm gonna go, I can't save the house, there's no way. And what people think, they have this idea of a giant wall of fire coming and just taking out everything in its path. That's actually not what we find burns down houses. What we find burns down houses is those embers that float along, and they float well ahead of the main body of the fire. They can travel many kilometers just on the wind. The wind is also self-generated by the fire. And they just land in whatever they happen to land in. If you have something combustible in or near your house, that can start a little fire, which very quickly becomes a big fire, and then it can take the entire building down. So that's a little bit more of the concept I'll get into in a bit. But that's what we're finding. So part of these controlled tests that FireSmart does, and they also partner with the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Agency. They run all kinds of studies on this stuff, but they love it and they do it all day. They will, if you think snowstorm of embers impinging on your home, and that's essentially what it looks like. So they'll build purposely built houses with all different kinds of building materials, different roofs, different windows, different siding, different shrubbery around the outside, and they'll bombard it with embers from their machines, and just to see what survives, what doesn't, what's risky, what isn't. So everything they've done has been proven over and over and over again, and it does work. They've also proven the houses that don't burn and why, when those big fires come through. So I won't get too much into the fuel management. Our environmental department's managing that. I think they're doing a great job, but there is a lot of forest out there. So specifically getting into FireSmart for your homes, the neighborhood recognition program, we've been running that for a few years. And that's geared towards more, say, communities of 30 to 100 homes. And we'll come into an area, a neighborhood, stratas as well, and we'll look around at mostly the common space. So it's the common space, and we'll come in and we'll say, okay, well, you know, maybe keep these wood piles away from your house. These trees here, they're all clumped together. Let's limb those up about 3 meters to remove that surface fuel. You know, let's get these cedars away from the buildings, things like that. So for that, and both of these programs, you can sign up online on our website. It's all the information's right there. I'll write those down for you at the end. For that one, you get, the community comes together, you get a community champion who sort of works with us as a point of contact, and we help you along through. And then at the end of it, you get a certificate. The community is certified through, or recognized rather, through FireSmart as a FireSmart community. We have a few here in North Van already. There's a strata complex just on Beaufort here. There's Sunshine Falls, and there's a few, not Blue Ridge. Anyway, there's a few others. It is a bit of a process, but what that does is it addresses the common space that quite often is not accessible, or one single or two homeowners can't attack all at once. You need the whole community to get in there and go do it together. Also new to North Van is the Home Partners Program, and that one is where we specifically focus on individual properties. So that one, same thing, you can apply online, you fill out the questionnaire, it comes to us, we'll contact you, we'll set up an appointment if you wish. If you want to walk around with us, you can do that. If you don't, that's fine too. We'll come, we'll assess the house, give you lots of tips and pointers, and then put it into a big report for you to see, and I'll give you lots of tips. So just a quick overview of what that looks like. I'm really missing my PowerPoint here. We work in concentric circles moving out from the property. So just very briefly to go over it, we're looking for nothing combustible within 1.5 meters of your structure, whatever that is. So 1.5 meters, nothing combustible. So wood piles, flammable combustible furniture. I think all of us in this room are probably guilty of this. I cannot honestly say my house is safe. Big one is trees with branches overhanging the roof. Build up in the eaves, right, in the gutters, right, build up material. So if you can picture that ember storm coming through, is there anything within 1.5 meters where those embers can land and get a purchase point and then start a fire, which will then of course transfer to the house. Even wood fences, what we're looking for is to stop any direct path for a fire to get to your house. So wood fence that comes along, wood fences are fine, but if there's a wood gate that butts right up to your house, then that's a potential hazard that we need to mitigate. Now, we of course are not suggesting that everybody run out and replace their roof and replace their fences and all of that. We're offering suggestions on what you can do to help mitigate. So if you have a cedar shake roof and it needs replacement anyway, maybe consider asphalt or metal, right? Or there could be very simple things like pruning a few shrubs, limbing a few trees, and moving the wood pile to the back of the yard rather than right up against or under the deck, for example, right? And we talk about all kinds of things from the actual building materials to what kind of vents do you have and how are they protected. Vents are a big one. They're a direct line right into your house. Fire on the outside of the house isn't necessarily a huge deal. It's when it gets into the house and how does it get into the house. Single pane windows will fail very quickly if there's say a hedge on fire outside. Double pane will survive much longer. But that window be getting singed and burning isn't a big deal, but if it fails, now the fire is straight inside the house and we could lose it very quickly. I am a little bit scattered here, if you can bear with me. I'm gonna back up a little bit. You touched on it a little bit, emergency resources being overwhelmed. So in a situation like this, it happens very, very quickly. Just because we also did mention it, the Lions Manor, I'm not sure if any of you popped by, saw it. So that was essentially one building. And almost every single fire truck, every single fire truck and firefighter who was on duty that day on the North Shore, so all West Van as well, was there. And that's just the resources it takes. Us as a municipality, we're not designed to put out 20 house fires at once. It's just, so what we try to do is protect them so that they don't catch on fire. The best way, like I said, so the best way to prevent those houses from burning down is to stop them from catching fire in the first place. So those concepts, so that 1.5 meter non-combustible zone, that's sort of the primary, that's the most important thing to focus on. And then once that's good, you start moving your way out. So the next zone is that 1.5 to up to 10 meters, okay? And then it goes on and on and on, and FireSmart is designed for everybody across the province, so it addresses farms and acreages and things like that. I don't know if any of you live on 10 acres here in North Van, but we probably don't need to get into that today. But up to 10 meters, it does also address the type of vegetation that you have planted around your house or maybe growing. What do you call them? The pine firs. A lot more flammable than, say, maples, right? So if you have a junipers are bad news. If you have one right up against your house, maybe consider removing that, replace it with something less combustible. We have, so on the website as well, if you ever see me out in public at public events, I have vegetation guides and landscape guides. Fantastic resource online, that's probably the easiest. So what plants, and it's all based on FireSmart concepts, what plants, shrubs are safe-ish to have planted around your property and which ones would you avoid. Cedars, cedar hedges, for example, avoid those. Junipers, they're bad news. Maples, things that are evergreen, they carry a lot of moisture in their leaves. Pretty safe. Yep.
Could you just comment for everyone's benefit? I did have Captain Laforet do that house assessment at my house, and he was very kind. He didn't write the words "you're screwed" on the report, but the 275% of normal risk told me that message quite clearly, and I have a fairly new house. And he did mention, and I took out the cedar hedge that was following my wood fence from the forest to my house.
Yeah.
But I believe, and maybe you can confirm this, because there's kind of a growing movement, I think, I feel a little bit more people interested in artificial grass. And I believe he said that was not good, it was combustible, is that correct?
Well, it's plastic essentially,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So consider that. I know like half our backyard is in shade, and part of me wants to put in artificial grass, but Captain Laforet said, yeah, not good.
Why do you want to put in artificial grass?
Because it's constantly in shade and grass won't grow.
Yeah, but something else will.
Yeah,
Moss
grows quite nicely. Yeah, mud proliferates as well.
It's always green, you don't have to cut it.
Yeah, we also have dogs, so they rip up the moss. So,
So grass is a good example. It's fine, as long as it's kept relatively short and you water it.
Yeah.
Right?
They're only allowed once a week.
See, who was mentioning, I think you were mentioning the difference in the policies depending on which department you
Yeah,
go to.
yeah.
Yeah, otherwise we get fined, district will fine us if they catch it.
Yeah, but you can do a hands.
Well, I'm not gonna.
You can have quite a fun discussion going before council
Yeah, right.
with that ticket and saying,
Yeah.
let me tell you why I watered it, because, because at the same point, talking about what you were talking about, I have a district greenbelt right behind my
Well, I
house.
was just gonna say, that's what I was gonna bring up.
Yeah, and when you go to the arborist for the district and you say, listen, I'm concerned about these trees because the trees seek the sunlight. So they grow over the fence and out reaching over the yard. And he's like, yeah, no, phototrophic is I think the word for that, where they're seeking sunlight. He says, we do not cut our trees because of phototrophic growth. And it's like, yeah, cool, okay, great. We're gonna have fun with insurance, aren't we?
And the problem with the district greenbelt too, as you say, layers and layers and layers of stuff are there.
Yeah.
Drying out, and when they cut the trees, they don't cut them up small, they just let all the logs just rot away, so it's been doing it for a very long time.
Those are a bit different. They don't remove those intentionally. They don't carry the same fire capacity than say the underbrush.
There's lots of underbrush, you've got the holly trees, I've got lots of.
Well, yes, I mean, there is some there. There's a lot of it everywhere.
Yeah.
They are working towards mitigating that, like we've seen around sort of in this neighborhood this year.
Okay.
So I think they've attacked 3, possibly 4 sizable chunks of land this year.
Okay.
Several last year.
Okay.
And every year going forward, I mean, they have them all mapped out in priority zones.
Okay.
And they'll get at, I mean, they're limited by staff and
Right.
fund and money.
Yeah,
But
they also get grants from the province for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a big part of what funds our program as well. So it's essentially, it's the same grant. So every year, our department and the arborist, we get together, or the community forester, we get together and we decide, okay, who needs what for the year. It's one grant for the district. And for example, if he's doing prescriptions one year, that's much less expensive than doing the actual work in the forests. So, and by doing the prescriptions, what he's doing is he's plotting out and mapping exactly where he's gonna be and what he needs to do it. And then the following year, and this is just an example, the following year he will actually be getting out and taking that vegetation out, which is much more labor intensive, much more
Because
expensive.
we do have a huge pipe behind our house from the court, and it goes up, and I believe it's all part of the Mount Seymour Conservation Water Management System up there. So it's totally overgrown. So
Yeah.
it is it's considered a right of way. Hopefully we won't get flooded in a fire.
Fingers crossed.
What do you do if the problem is on private land?
Whose?
Pardon?
Whose private land?
Yours.
Not mine.
Oh, you mean like a neighbor?
Yes.
Oh. Well,
There goes Brownie.
I get that question a lot. I get that question a lot. My suggestion would be focus on yours. Nothing you can do about that property. Nothing I can do about that property. But if you focus on yours, you do the best you can with yours, perhaps that might encourage your neighbor to maybe go down the same path. I'm very happy to go and do one assessment after the other, but there's, I mean, really, all you can really do is protect yours. And there definitely is things you can do to protect from that other property. The Fire Smart is specifically geared towards wildfire, not rather than say just your standard house fires, hoarding, bad manners, neighbor kind of syndrome. We look at how to protect from those ember impingements, forest fire coming through. But if he's constantly, say, got an open fire pit or barbecuing with a bunch of trees, I mean, there's lots of examples. I've seen it all.
I'll tell you about it later.
Yeah, I just have a question when you said underbrush, you know, you're talking about underbrush that, I mean, obviously dead underbrush is really bad, but
Yeah.
are bushes generally speaking really fuel for?
Well, it depends on the type of bush, but mostly the dead decaying. dried leaves, dried branches, dried brushes. That
So
are
I
just-
went and planted a bunch of sorrel because that's a natural.
Yeah.
But underneath my big trees, but is that bad to?
The salal?
Sorrel, yeah.
Salal's generally okay. It's green all year and carries a lot of moisture.
But it's, yeah, so.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend planting it right underneath, say, you know, up against a patio or a deck, or right underneath some windows right up against your house. But if you're planting it sort of, you're planting your garden, right, under some trees, that's fine, yeah. Yeah, we look at, I mean, we do understand that people like gardens and they like vegetation and they like trees and bushes. But you wanna have a separation from whatever is flammable to your actual structure. So that's sort of the key takeaway is you don't want the fire to be able to transfer directly to your home. If you Google the Fort McMurray fire, there's lots and lots and lots of video, most of it dash cam, of people trying to evacuate out, and also the emergency vehicles that were driving around the city after the fact had cameras on as well, and a lot of those videos are online now. And a really interesting one that I found was, I believe it was a police car, was slowly making its way down the street with fire coming across, basically coming straight into the community from one side. His side of the car was getting singed, and out this side you could see all the homes he was passing. And the fire hadn't reached them yet. They were totally fine, but as he slowly drives down the street, you can see the embers land in one shrub on one particular house, and then he's stopped at a light or he's stuck in traffic or something like that. And you just watch that one shrub caught on fire, it got up under the roof, it caught the roof on fire, and before he'd really even turned the corner, the house was half burnt down and starting to impinge on the other two homes next to it. But if it wasn't for that one, but there was embers hitting the entire street. If it wasn't for that one push, the house probably wouldn't have burned. So it's an eye opener. It was interesting how it all shakes out that way.
Do you have any information published as to what plants are worse than others to have in your garden?
For sure, yeah. The FireSmart BC puts out a vegetation guide.
How about ivy?
How about ivy? Well, it kind of depends on how old it is, because
A lot of it's climbing the trees.
Yeah, well, and what kind of shape is the tree in too, right? Is it climbing up an old dead trunk, or is it really old ivy that's got this much dead stuff on the inside, right? So, or is it pretty fresh and new? And so it kind of depends. That by itself, if it's far away from your house, maybe not such a big deal. But if it's right up against your house or climbing up into your eaves, then it's something you'd probably want to address. But that vegetation guide, if you want really specific details on which type of vegetation, which plant, which trees are less combustible than others, that's a good place to start.
Where do you find it again?
FireSmart BC has it. Yeah, here, I'll write those down right now, actually. So, FireSmart BC, it's all one word. I think it's .ca. And then ours, so it's DNV, DNV.org. And specifically, DNV.org, home safety.
Do they have different information?
Yep. So FireSmart BC has lots of information. All of it I've stolen to tell you today. That's where we get everything. We partner with them. We use their product, their program, and we deliver to our community. This one here, DNV.org, this has information specifically on those two programs that I mentioned, the Community Recognition Program and the Home Partners Program. And if you want to read about it, if you want to apply, you want to get a home assessment, that's where you do that as well. Yeah, so I don't know if this will work specifically, but if you go to dnv.org, then you just find home safety and click on it. It'll take you to that page, and there's quite a bit of information there as well, and that's how you can reach us.
Do you do home assessments for an entire complex, or do you have a townhouse complex?
We do. We've only recently kind of run into, run into that, I won't call it an issue, but that situation. It's not, the program isn't designed that way, so it doesn't translate very well. But townhouse complexes, stratas are more geared towards the neighborhood recognition program. So it's really the same concept. It's just, it's when we go to write the report doesn't translate very well if we're doing it for one property rather than, because I mean the strata has possibly numerous buildings or many different sides to it. You know, huge piece of property. It doesn't work very well for the home partners, but we do have a program for that. Yeah. That's essentially my spiel. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Is there information somewhere with elderly people, I know that class, very elderly people, widowed woman whose backyard has just started to overwhelm her.
Yeah.
And she's done phoning around to get quotes, etc.
Yeah.
But that is another overwhelming thing for her. It's so expensive. So I'm wondering if is there some organizations out there that will, you know, have lesser fees or will just come into.
That's a tough situation. That's a tough situation. So part of, and I believe there's information here, and there's definitely information at FireSmart BC. There are grants available.
Okay.
They're not a lot,
right.
and given landscaping costs these days, they may not go very far. But it might just be enough to help. Yeah. So
okay.
That also being said, the application process can be a little daunting. As it's government funds, so it's not easy. But we can certainly help with that. Yeah. So check those out. See what you think. Give it a read. If we can help, please let me know. And even if it's just as easy as getting a crew in to, you know, trim the grass, get all the dead stuff away from the house. And clean the gutters. That can be done for just a few $100s. That's not particularly impossible.
Excellent.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a suggestion because we have a number of community Facebook groups in this community that are really helpful. One of them is called Deep Cove Neighbors Helping Each Other.
Oh, right.
And it would be great for people to join that. There's another one, Deep Cove to Linmore Community Alerts and Concerns, that is kind of on a similar topic. But on the helping each other one, it strikes me, you know, if you have somebody in need, it might be great to say, hey, can we organize a community event and get a bunch of people out to help? And because if you asked, 20 people to donate 4 hours one Saturday, probably get it done.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that'd be a good place to post something like that. You know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And would she be amenable to that?
Well, that's the other question. Yeah, she's very what would you say?
Independent?
Well, no, not stubborn or independent. Very. No, not even picky. She's very home.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And she just feels like she doesn't want anybody to bother or, all causes it even just she would ask.
Maybe
Yes.
you present.
Oh, I've presented many times. Many times. And she's so embarrassed how bad it is too that she's like, I don't want anybody to, come in and see this. So it's kind of,
She's in a catch
difficult. So you'll have to just sneak in tonight.
Do you work with does the program work with various folks who work in the gardening industry to train them too in some of the FireSmart stuff? So when they are going into the yards doing cleaning up and they're aware of what the FireSmart techniques might be?
We don't. Our department doesn't. We do work closely with our community forester.
Okay.
And the environmental department.
Okay.
They're not the one. I mean, those are private companies, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're the landscapers. Now this information is available to the landscapers. I know a lot of landscape companies are familiar with it.
Okay.
But they don't necessarily work with us directly to do
You know, I was thinking of this elderly lady, and there's a lot of people with big gardens who can't maintain them as well.
So I have spoken on the phone with actually architects who are asking about fire smart building materials.
Okay.
And I have had a couple conversation with landscape companies, local landscape companies who are looking for that information. I point them in this direction, and that's more or less it. Yeah.
So how far does one allow the forest? I mean, you said 1.5 meters.
Yeah.
Back.
So it's about 6 feet.
Yeah, that's all. You allow the forest to come that close to the houses?
Well,
Or
nothing
you
combustible.
recommend-
Nothing combustible.
Yeah, nothing combustible.
And that applies to anything. You know, a wood pile, a stack of plastics, scrap wood. I've seen scrap wood like lumber, building construction lumber, under a deck. Right. Makes sense at the time. You want to keep it dry. It's out of the way. It's not going to bother anybody. But if it's not a deck that's closed in, embers can get in there. They can start that fire, and then they have a direct route up to your actual house. So things like that. So as far as the forest, bushes, trees, shrubbery, beyond that, say 6 feet to the next, it's 10 meters is the next zone. Very fine. But what we try to limit is a direct route for the fire to travel to get straight to your house. So
Like
fences, hedges, overhanging branches. Overhanging branches are bad because they can burn. They're not necessarily getting on the house, but then they'll drop embers right onto the roof.
If you cut off one side of the tree, doesn't that impair the health of the tree or the stability
Well,
of the tree?
I mean, it really does depend on how close that tree is to your house, how big it is, how many limbs we're talking about. I mean, some of these firs have 40-foot limbs. What do you do? If they're that close to your house, then I mean, you may be some more issues there as well.
Yeah, but then there's the problem with.
We do try to fix it. Yeah.
There's a problem with Peter suggested, where you've got district, trees that are in district property, and the leaves are hanging over your roof.
So we've been working only recently, very closely with the district forester, who, and as I mentioned, we partner on this grant, so we've been talking quite a bit. He's very aware of the program we're running, and he is very amenable to these concepts, and I believe, I don't want to speak for him, but he's definitely taking that into account when district policies or bylaws are saying you cannot cut this tree down, you cannot touch that tree. They're a little more flexible. Now, and again, I can't speak for him. Don't quote me on this. I'm on video. This is my disclaimer. Sorry, guy. They're looking at it from a different lens now than they did, say, 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
So if you came out, because there are complexes surrounded by trees, and a lot of those trees are hanging over the fence.
Yeah.
And we're all really concerned about it,
Yeah.
especially my place, because it's closest to the fence.
Yeah.
They're hanging right over. So, and we've been told by the arborist that that tree is perfectly healthy, we're not taking it down.
Well, so maybe the tree doesn't have to come down, but what about limbing it?
And then, so would we have the right to do that? We still have to go to the district.
That would be a question for them. I do know that if it's two private properties, and a tree is on one property but overhanging the other, this person is allowed to limb that so it's not impinging or hanging over their property.
But I'm going to do it with the district tree.
So that's a good question
That's
for
the
them.
question.
But if you have, say, this report from us in your hand,
Yeah.
and you could take it to them and say, well, the fire department says that these are overhanging my roof and they pose a fire hazard.
So that's what we need to.
That can start the conversation there. Yeah.
So on the edge of our property, which is actually is on district land, we have some large trees, and I took out like 10 of those old garbage things of the sod, you know, the and stuff underneath. But then I watched in the heat of the summer all the trees freaking out because I think that keeps moisture. So is the arborist the guy to talk to about that? what's the best, you know?
Well, that's a very tough situation. I mean, the entire area was shocked from that heat, right? Every tree, and then you add in the beetles, the looper moths, and everything that's impacting our forests these days, and they go in cycles and seasons. It's a stress on the entire system. Incidentally, I was at a conference this week, and they were talking about fuel mitigations in the forest, and up to 2 years ago, the concept was thin everything out, including the canopy, and you want to space the trees out so that there's no massive fuel load all in one place. The fire kind of has to make its way from one to the next. But then what they found was when you thin out the canopy, they can measure. There's a measured heat increase on the ground level, and also increased wind, and both of those things are bad for fire. So then they started thinking, okay, well, maybe we don't want to do this. So how do we clear this up? How do we limb this? So then they started to clear, but not necessarily thin out the canopy. And that didn't necessarily encourage sunlight to come through, so it kept everything cool, which is fine. But then, to back up even further a little bit, what they found was that when they did thin it out, it encouraged more sunlight, more growth, so then they had a lot more native plant life growth coming into the area. So the takeaway was, they're not sure yet. They don't know, and I sat there listening to this lecture for 45 minutes, and they didn't actually have a conclusion or something to take away from that, except they told us what they're doing, they're studying it very closely, but they're not quite sure what the best approach is yet.
Well, I think you said it right at the beginning, forest fires are a natural way to sort of regenerate the forest.
Yeah.
Forest fires happen.
Yeah.
Now, we can interfere all we want, but we can't absolutely stop forest fires, and all we can do is try to protect ourselves.
Protect your homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't foresee a prescribed burn on Mount Seymour happening anytime soon. Well, I mean, everybody's saying it would help. Oh.
Time's up.
All right.
That's why the RV was taken
So,
because it used to be burned down.
feel free to distribute my name, email address to anybody, and you've got the websites here. You can actually, by filling this out, it does come to me, the application, and I'm always happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Well, thanks both of you. I'm sorry, if I'd known you needed a computer and projector, I could have provided you.
I think it might have been offered, and we at least worked out.